Have you ever wondered why so many men seem magnetically drawn to women who don't follow the script of docility, submission, or predictability? Why, when faced with a woman who sets boundaries and doesn't apologize for existing with intensity, many men don't just become interested, they become captivated? Maybe the answer doesn't lie in her attitude, but in what that attitude awakens within them. Carl Jung said that everything we find fascinating in another person is actually a mirror of what our soul longs to integrate. And in this case, what men see in bad women is the reflection of the freedom they themselves never learned to cultivate. But what really is a bad woman? Is she the one who manipulates, plays games, or causes harm? Or is she simply the one who dares to be whole, even if that means making others uncomfortable? Society has taught for centuries that the ideal woman is the one who pleases, waits, adapts. But there's an almost inexplicable fascination with those who break that mold. And it's not because they are bad, it's because they are free. And freedom, for many men, is an uncharted, terrifying, and irresistible territory. When a woman doesn't bow down, she becomes a mirror reflecting the weakness of someone who always needed to dominate in order to feel strong. That's when the game changes. The man, unconsciously, faces an archetype that challenges his ego, a woman who doesn't depend on him, who doesn't need his validation, who isn't afraid to walk away. And the more he tries to fit her into his expectations, the more she slips through his fingers like fine sand. This is not a game. It's a symbolic dance between power and vulnerability, between desire and fear, between the old model of masculinity and the new awareness that is starting to emerge. Jung would call this a confrontation with the shadow, the moment when a man is forced to face the parts of himself he never wanted to admit. And that's why he comes back, even when he swears he won't, even when he tries to replace her, erase her, forget her. Because what he felt beside that woman wasn't just passion. It was confrontation. It was awakening. It was an unspoken invitation to grow, to stop being a boy and become a man. And that, no matter how much it scares him, is also what draws him the most. The bad woman is not bad. She is a mirror, a boundary, a compass. She marks the beginning of the end for an ego he can no longer sustain, and the beginning of a new man he doesn't yet know how to become. So if you've ever been called difficult, cold, or too intense, understand, maybe you were just the first woman to show him that true love is not submission, it's revolution, and that even if he never admits it out loud, his body, his gaze, and his silent returns will always confirm it. Because a woman who awakens a man is unforgettable. She leaves a mark on the soul. She becomes the breaking point between who he was and who he might finally be ready to become. Everything begins the moment a woman refuses to shrink herself to fit into a man's emotional world. That moment, barely visible to the outside eye, triggers a seismic impact within the male psyche. Jung taught that the human soul is shaped through confrontation with what we most try to avoid. And for many men, that confrontation is called the woman who does not submit. She is the living symbol of the shadow. That archetype that lays bare what lies hidden beneath the masks of pride, authority, and control. When a woman says no with firmness, when she demands respect without raising her voice, when she disappears without drama but with dignity, something breaks inside the man. And what breaks is not desire, it's illusion. He realizes he has no power over her. And that realization, while painful, is irresistibly fascinating because for the first time he's not facing a woman, he's facing himself, or better said, he's facing the part of himself he never had the courage to look in the eye, his own emotional limitation. That kind of woman doesn't scream, but she echoes. She doesn't beg, but she transforms. She doesn't seek revenge, but she awakens. And that's why her impact doesn't end with her presence. Her absence speaks louder than words. When she leaves, she doesn't just take her body, she takes the mirror. And without that reflection, he feels lost, without direction. Jung explained that true love is not the one that fills you, but the one that exposes you. And by exposing the raw truth of an emotionally immature man, that woman becomes, without trying, the starting point of a new consciousness. But that connection is not easy to recognize. Many women wonder, why does he approach me so intensely and then pull away as if he's afraid of me? The answer lies in the fear of transformation itself. Loving a free woman requires that a man renounce domination, inflated ego, and the need for control. He would have to deconstruct himself. And that hurts. That's why he runs, why he denies, why he tries to replace her. But nothing fills the space she once occupied, because it wasn't just a romance, it was a revelation. It was in the encounter between his ego and her essence that the beginning of an emotional journey was born, a journey few men have the courage to follow through to the end. But those who do are never the same again. And even if they never return, even if they never admit it, that woman will forever remain the memory of who he could have become if he had chosen to grow. There exists an invisible tension between what a man feels and what he's willing to face. When he stands before a woman who doesn't surrender, he's hit by a sensation he doesn't know how to name, a mixture of desire, frustration, and silent rage. It's not rage toward her, it's rage toward himself, for realizing that all his tools of seduction, emotional manipulation, and empty promises are useless here. Jung said that the ego becomes desperate when it cannot control what it desires, and that's exactly what happens. The man desires that woman with the intensity of someone wanting to possess her, but he's faced with the impossibility of dominating her. In that moment, the emotional game reaches its peak, not as a battle between two people, but as a confrontation between his ego and her soul. She represents everything he doesn't understand, yet is deeply intrigued by. Her independence challenges him, her calm destabilizes him, her absence crushes him. And he doesn't understand why. After all, she didn't beg, didn't humiliate herself, didn't ask for scraps of attention. So why does he feel so disturbed? The answer lies in the unconscious, where her image fuses with everything he's always feared, being unmasked. Every time that woman sets a boundary, she causes micro-fractures in the emotional castle he built over a lifetime, fractures that force him to see the cracks in his learned virility, his performative masculinity, and the roles the world imposed on him, roles he unknowingly adopted as armor. But now that armor no longer protects, it imprisons. And the greatest fear of a man who hasn't yet deconstructed himself is having to let go of those defenses to become vulnerable in front of someone who isn't impressed by his strength, but demands truth. The tension grows because deep down he knows he can't fool this woman. She sees him completely. She sees his excesses and his silences, his attempts at control and his fragilities disguised as indifference. And that terrifies him more than any rejection, because she doesn't just see the man he pretends to be, she touches the man he's been hiding. And that silent exposure is unbearable for an ego that has always needed to dominate in order to feel desirable. That's why he walks away, not because he doesn't like her, but because he can't bear what she forces him to see. He'd prefer a woman who pretends not to notice, who accepts crumbs, who spares him from seeing himself stripped bare. But that woman is different. She doesn't demand anything, but her presence demands everything, and that everything is precisely what he still doesn't know how to give, his soul. When the woman leaves, her silence becomes deafening. There are no messages, no reproaches, no threats, only absence. But this absence is different. It's heavy, symbolic, uncomfortable. Carl Jung said that the unconscious reveals itself through symbols, and that is exactly what she becomes, a symbol, an archetypal mirror reflecting everything he's avoided all his life. She wasn't just a person, she was a breaking point. And now, in the echo of her absence, he begins to think, perhaps for the very first time, truly. Pride tries to resist, comes up with excuses, rationalizations, feeds the internal narrative that she was the one who overreacted, who expected too much, who was cold. But something inside him can no longer support that story, because deep down, he knows. She didn't expect anything more than presence, nothing more than truth, nothing more than a man who knew how to love without needing to control. And now every gesture of hers becomes a symbolic memory. The firm gaze, the way she stayed silent when disrespected, the lightness with which she said goodbye. It all comes back like pieces of a puzzle he tries to put together too late. This reflection is not romantic. It is painful. Because what he sees now is not only what he lost, but what he didn't know how to be. He realizes that instead of protecting her, he tried to dominate her, that instead of loving her with maturity, he wanted to make her dependent on his instability, that instead of building something real, he played with the idea of power, and that corrodes him from within, because she was the first one who didn't fall into that trap. She didn't stay to be reformed, she left to preserve herself. At that precise moment, many men go into crisis because the ego can no longer sustain the illusion of emotional superiority. He sees that instead of being strong, he was immature, that instead of being desirable, he was predictable, that instead of being brave, he was small. And that realization, when genuine, opens a crack in the psychic armor, a crack through which the light begins to enter. Jung said that self-knowledge begins when we stop projecting blame onto others and start taking responsibility for our own shadows. And that is exactly what she triggered, a disruption in the cycle of projection. And he begins to understand it wasn't that she was bad, she was fair. It wasn't that she was cold, she was firm. It wasn't that she was difficult, she was whole. And that kind of woman only frightens those who haven't yet learned to look at themselves deeply, because she doesn't want a hero, doesn't want a father, doesn't want an owner. She wants someone with the courage to walk beside her, with a bare soul, a present heart, and truth in his eyes. And now he sees all of that, but he sees it alone. Every true transformation begins with a loss, and there is no loss more impactful than the one that forces someone to confront their own shadow. Carl Jung stated that what we reject most in ourselves is what controls us the most. And when that man loses the woman who didn't bend, the woman who confronted him with silent gestures and a steady presence, he begins to feel on his skin what he always avoided feeling, the emptiness of his own emotional immaturity. It's not her absence that hurts, it's what she unearthed within him. And that pain is the beginning of something new. Little by little, the defenses begin to crumble. Rage gives way to shame. Avoidance gives way to longing. Pride gives way to reflection. And where there once was armor, now stands a man stripped of the illusions that kept him safe, but far from his own essence. The woman he called difficult was, in truth, the only one who saw beyond his facade, and it's that gaze that begins to transform him, not because she tried to change him, but because she forced him to see himself. And truly, seeing oneself is an experience that transforms forever. It's not a beautiful process. The soul bleeds, the ego writhes, the mind desperately tries to return to old patterns, but it can't, because the experience of having known a whole woman creates a new internal standard. After her, all others seem pale, because none of them silently demand that he rise. None so delicately expose the wounds he's hidden his entire life. None reach so deep. And that impact becomes a symbolic scar, a constant reminder that something needs to change. That man then begins to deconstruct himself. He stops seeking validation through applause and starts seeking meaning in silence. He abandons the desire to be desired and begins to desire to be real. He doesn't become weak, he becomes human. And that is where true strength is born. Jung said that there is no awakening without pain, and that individuation, the process of becoming who you truly are, only happens when we face our own darkness. That woman was the spark that ignited that process, and even if she's far away, she remains present as a symbol of who he can still become. The transformation does not happen to win her back. It's no longer about her. It's about him now, about rebuilding himself based on truth, not performance, about stopping the need to impress, and beginning to live in integration, about recognizing that love, when real, does not accept the ego as its guide. Because true love, the kind that transcends, that heals, that awakens, can only bloom when the mask falls and the authentic self finally emerges. After the fall of the ego, the world is no longer the same, and neither is he. The man who once sought admiration now longs for connection. What he once saw as a power game, he now understands as an invitation to vulnerability. He begins to realize that the woman who unsettled him wasn't arrogant, she was whole. That it wasn't her who was too much, but him who was emotionally lacking. Carl Jung said that true healing only begins when we look at what hurt us with the eyes of learning, and that's exactly what's happening. She left a mark, but not as a wound, rather as a sign. This new man doesn't arrive with promises, but with presence. He no longer seeks to be the answer, but is willing to listen to the questions. He knows that it's not enough to love. Love must be sustained with maturity. And he now understands that the woman who made him question everything doesn't want to be saved, conquered, or convinced. She wants to be respected in her depth, recognized in her truth, embraced in her strength. And that can only happen when the man finally lets go of the need to be superior and humbly chooses to be real. This new vision isn't expressed through grand words, but through silent actions. He doesn't beg, he shows. He doesn't seduce, he supports. He doesn't display, he surrenders. Because he finally understood that a true woman is not impressed by promises or power, but by a man's ability to remain whole by her side, even when everything in her confronts him. Respect is no longer a strategy, it has become essence. Admiration is no longer vanity, it has become recognition. And desire is no longer ego, it has become communion. But he also understands that perhaps he arrived too late, that this woman has already moved on, that maybe she's not willing to reopen doors she had to close in order not to lose herself, and that instead of stirring anger, stirs reverence, because now he knows the value she had and the price she paid for being the only one who saw where he was still blind. Carl Jung said that not all encounters are meant to last. Some come only to awaken us. And awakening on its own is already a miracle. He doesn't wait for forgiveness, doesn't demand a return, doesn't idealize a reunion. He simply continues with a clearer heart, a more honest soul, and a silent gratitude for that woman who, without asking permission, entered, exposed, tore open, and left. Because sometimes that's precisely what love does. It destroys the false so that the true may be born, and now for the first time he's ready to love. Maybe not her, but himself. And only from there can any other love be true. She became a milestone in his emotional timeline, not for the intensity of the words spoken, but for the strength of the silence that remained. And no matter how much time passes, no matter how many other bodies try to occupy that space, nothing replaces what she represented. Carl Jung said that certain archetypes cannot be erased, only integrated, and she was exactly that, a living archetype. The embodiment of the woman who didn't come to complete him, but to deconstruct him, who didn't appear to console, but to provoke, who didn't arrive to fill the emptiness, but to show that it existed. He may try to forget, rationalize, move on. He may dive into new stories, new voices, new presences, but none will be her, because she wasn't a phase, she was a mirror. And the mirrors that reveal us are never forgotten, even when they cause pain, even when they strip us of vanity, superiority, and control. He knows it. The woman he tried to tame was, in reality, the beginning of his liberation. And though it took him time to understand, it finally made sense. She wasn't difficult, she was necessary. Her image doesn't arise as nostalgia, but as awareness. When he hears a phrase, she used to say, when he feels an emptiness in his chest with her name. When he recognizes in someone else what he has never found again, he understands. He understands that not all pain is loss. Some are seeds she planted unknowingly, which now bloom in his small decisions, in the way he listens, in how he respects, in how he gives of himself. She was the last woman of the stage in which he was still asleep, and the first woman he saw with the eyes of awakening. And he will never openly admit it. Maybe out of pride, maybe out of respect, maybe because he knows she no longer fits into his present. But deep inside, in the most intimate corner of the soul, where masks no longer reach, he keeps that secret like someone guarding a relic. She wasn't just a woman, she was a revelation, the embodiment of what he could have experienced if he had been ready. And now that he is, he understands that some encounters aren't meant to last, they're meant to leave a mark. The woman he once called bad was, in truth, simply authentic. And truth, when one isn't prepared for it, is frightening. But once awakened, it transforms, and even if their paths never cross again, what she stirred within him will continue to resonate, because there are women who pass through and there are women who awaken. And she was the awakening he spent his whole life pretending he didn't need. There are encounters that don't fade, they remain. Not because of force, but because of depth, like footprints etched into the soul. They don't scream, but whisper through the days. And when silence falls, it's there that their traces reveal themselves most clearly. The woman who was once called bad was never the opposite of love. She was its portal. The one that demands courage to cross and humility to understand. She didn't destroy the man she met. She revealed what within him was not yet true. And for that reason, even in silence, she continues to transform him. Within him now exists a new way of listening, a new gaze, a new sense of presence. He is no longer dazzled by games. He no longer gives himself to superficiality. He no longer seeks to hide behind masks. Because by touching the edge of his own ego, he discovered the beginning of his soul. Carl Jung said that the true loving encounter happens when two consciousnesses recognize each other. And maybe she was the only one who saw him, even before he knew who he was. It was that mirror that woke him up. An awakening, no matter how painful, is never in vain. Some men will continue to run, to blame, to hide from themselves, but others, those who have the courage to look back truthfully, will understand. They will realize that they didn't lose a woman, but gained an opportunity, a rare opportunity to rebuild themselves from the inside out, from that which hurts, that which unsettles, that which challenges, and that which, paradoxically, sets them free. Because there is no freedom without self-awareness, and there is no real love where the ego still reigns. That woman was a silent revolution, and true revolutions never ask permission to happen. So if this video touched something inside you that you didn't know how to name, but you felt, it may be time to look within, to stop running after others, and start walking beside yourself. And only then, beside someone else, because the kind of love that awakens us isn't the one that comforts, it's the one that transforms. And sometimes the one you judged as the stone in your path was actually the key you needed to open the door of your awareness. She wasn't your enemy, she was your initiator. If this message resonated with you, let it resonate beyond you. Like, comment, share. Write here what you felt, because maybe in your story, another woman will recognize herself, another man will awaken, and together we can build more conscious relationships. Subscribe to the channel if you wish to continue on this path of depth, truth, and transformation. And remember, the one who sees you with the eyes of the soul will never forget what they saw. There is an almost imperceptible yet devastating moment when a woman feels that something has changed. The man who once seemed so present begins to drift away. Suddenly, his messages take longer to arrive, his words sound colder, his attention is no longer so easily obtained. And in that instant, a shadow falls, anxiety, fear, and the feeling of loss begin to consume from within. Many women, driven by that deep terror of losing him, make the most human and yet the most counterproductive mistake. They try to do more. They send messages, seek explanations, propose meetings, try to reignite what they feel slipping through their fingers. But this insistence, although born from love and fear, only succeeds in accelerating the fall. Why? Because for a man, excessive neediness is not attraction, it is pressure. It is not love, it is a burden. Jung, in his book The Dynamics of the Unconscious, explains that everything the soul clutches too tightly tends to slip away like sand between the fingers. The more need we show, the faster we risk losing what we are trying to hold on to. What we often fail to understand is that in male psychology, what is hard to attain holds more value. A man feels more desire for what he senses he could lose, not for what he perceives as guaranteed. A woman who makes herself too available, too attentive, without leaving room for absence, eventually becomes emotionally invisible. Overexposure kills mystery, and mystery is the oxygen of desire. Imagine a precious jewel displayed on every corner. Over time, it loses its value in the eyes of those who see it. But if that jewel is unique, rare, difficult to obtain, it becomes coveted, almost sacred. This is how human desire works. This is how male desire works. Today I will show you how to radically change this dynamic, not through cheap games or manipulations, but from a place of profound emotional wisdom. You will learn the art of strategic silence, not as a punishment, but as an act of self-love. You will understand how to invest all that energy into yourself until you become a woman so complete, so magnetic, so fulfilled that his return, if it happens, will be a free choice, not the result of pressure. And if he doesn't come back, you will have won someone far more important, yourself. Get ready? Because once you understand this, you will never chase again. You will learn to attract. When a man starts to pull away, the first emotional reaction many women experience is a profound sense of loss. It's not just the loss of the man himself, but the loss of the illusion of the imagined future moments, of the emotional safe place his presence represented. This loss, although intangible, hits with brutal force. Anxiety settles in silently. Every minute without a reply feels like an eternity. Every cold or distant conversation is analyzed and reanalyzed, searching for signs, explanations, someone to blame. The mind enters an endless loop. What did I do wrong? How can I fix it? How do I make things go back to how they were? And with each thought, the heart shrinks a little more. Jung, in his work, Psychological Types, warns us that man suffers because he mistakenly interprets what happens within himself as something happening outside of him. In other words, we believe that the cause of our suffering lies in the other, when in reality it is an internal battle between our unmet desires and our perception of self-worth. This anxiety and helplessness are not only painful, but also emotionally dangerous. Under their influence, many women fall into behaviors they would never have considered from a balanced emotional state. Begging for attention, persistently questioning, seeking answers where there is only silence. And the more one acts from that place of fear and need, the more the man's perception of the woman deteriorates. Because in his instinctive psychology, a man does not feel attraction towards someone who seems to need him to survive. Neediness smells of desperation, and desperation repels human desire. As Jung aptly points out in The Psychology of the Unconscious, desire is born from mystery, from longing, from the space between the self and the other, not from control or possession. Thus, without realizing it, when we try to force the connection we feel is breaking, we end up tearing it even more. We want to get closer, but in that desperate attempt, we move further away. We want to hold on, but the fear of losing makes him run. That's why the first step is not to do more, the first step is to stop. Breathe, acknowledge the pain, yes, but do not act from it. Because every action driven by fear is another brick in the wall now separating us from what we desire. It is an act of immense courage to stop in the middle of anxiety, and paradoxically, it is the first act of true self-love, not towards him but towards ourselves. Faced with the fear of losing a man who is starting to pull away, many women believe the solution is to intensify their efforts. It's an almost instinctive impulse. If I show myself more present, more loving, more available, he will remember why he loved me and return. But this reasoning, although it seems logical from a place of pain, actually goes directly against male psychology. Each extra message, each forced attempt at connection, each search for validation does not rebuild the bond, it erodes it, because the underlying message the man perceives is not love, but neediness. It's not connection, but lack. It's important to understand that human beings, men and women alike, perceive emotional vibrations long before we process them rationally. He doesn't pull away because he analyzes you coldly. He pulls away because something in his instinct screams that something has changed. Carl Jung, in Symbols of Transformation, teaches that what we deny subjugates us and what we accept transforms us. Denying the anxiety we feel pushes us to act out of desperation. Accepting it, on the other hand, gives us the chance to transform it into inner power. When we refuse to accept the possibility of losing him, we become prisoners of fear, and that fear seeps into every word, every gesture, every insistence. And a man, even without consciously knowing it, feels repelled by that energy. Imagine for a moment a flower. A flower does not run after bees. It does not beg to be pollinated. It remains in its essence, open, beautiful, vibrant, allowing the bees to discover and value it for what it is. This is how feminine self-love should be, a quiet force, not a desperate chase. When a woman throws herself into doing more, writing, calling, seeking forced encounters, she unconsciously sends a devastating message. Without you, I am not enough. And that message destroys attraction at its very root. The paradox is that the more a woman tries to hold on to the connection through insistence, the faster she pushes the man away. Because in the male mind, conquest is essential. They do not value what they feel is guaranteed. Jung, in The Ego and the Unconscious, points out that the soul instinctively seeks what it has not yet possessed, because in desire lies its vital impulse. A man desires what represents an emotional challenge, something he must conquer again and again. Forcing someone's presence is like trying to hold water in your hands by squeezing tighter. The more force you apply, the faster it slips away. It's an act of desperation that ends up stealing your own emotional dignity. Neediness creates emotional dependence, and dependence inevitably destroys respect. When a man perceives that a woman needs his presence to feel valuable, his instinct drives him to seek freedom, because his unconscious tells him that there is no genuine admiration there, but rather an invisible demand that suffocates him. That's why the key is not to do more. It's not to chase after him, to beg for attention, or to try to prove your worth. The real power lies in withdrawing, in reconnecting with yourself, in stopping the need for external validation. When a woman stops fighting to be chosen and starts choosing herself, something changes radically. Her energy transforms. She stops being a need and becomes a gift. She stops being an obligation and becomes an irresistible choice. When the feminine soul connects with its own worth, it begins to emit a different frequency, a blend of serenity, mystery, and fulfillment that cannot be ignored. This energy not only attracts men, but also acts as a filter, because a man who is not ready for a woman in her power will not be able to sustain her presence. It's not about pretending to be indifferent or playing mind games. It's about a real change within you, a change that silently says, I desire you, but I don't need you. I can love you, but I will not lose my soul to keep you. And it is at that moment, when you no longer fight, when you no longer beg, when you have found your own center, that the true magic happens. The man who feels your absence, not as a strategy, but as a natural consequence of your self-love, will begin to see in you something far more valuable than he had ever perceived, a complete, free, powerful woman. And then, and only then, can a new connection arise, not based on fear, but on admiration, not based on lack, but on genuine desire. The mistake of doing more to avoid losing him may seem, in the midst of pain, like the only way out. But now you know the truth. You should not do more for him. You should do more for yourself. There is a fundamental truth in human nature. We value more what is scarce. This law governs not only the economy but also the emotional and relational world. What is offered in excess, what is always available, ends up being underestimated. Love, desire, and admiration are fed by the sense of exclusivity, of conquest, of the possibility of loss. And this is even more true in male psychology. A man values what he feels he cannot fully possess. He appreciates what he must continually conquer. When a woman becomes too available, too predictable, too devoted, she unconsciously ceases to represent an emotional challenge. And when there is no challenge, there is no drive to conquer. When there is no conquest, attraction weakens. Carl Jung, in his book The Psychology of the Unconscious, explains that true desire is born from longing, and longing only exists within emotional distance. When we are too close, too available, we kill that necessary distance for desire to flourish. Think of a rare gem hidden deep within an inaccessible cave. Those who know of its existence are willing to take risks to explore, to invest time and effort to reach it. Now imagine that same gem offered for free on an ordinary table, accessible to anyone without any effort. The perceived value changes, not because the gem is different, but because the perception of its rarity has changed. The same happens in emotional dynamics. A woman who preserves her mystery, her inner world, her rich and independent life, becomes a gem that is hard to reach, not because she plays games, but because her fullness makes her inaccessible to anyone who is not willing to earn her. Over-availability sends another dangerous message for the dynamics of attraction. It transmits that your time, your attention, your love are available to anyone, without conditions, without needing to be earned. And in the male unconscious, this reduces your value. A man is not only seeking love, he seeks admiration. He wants to feel that he has won something valuable, that his presence, effort, and dedication have a purpose. If he perceives that he doesn't need to make an effort, that your love is already guaranteed, his vital drive for conquest dulls. Not because he is a bad man, but because it is part of his instinctive nature. Jung states it precisely in Symbols of Transformation. Passion ignites in the human heart when the object of desire is wrapped in mystery and inaccessibility. When a woman disappears as an emotional challenge, desire also disappears. Many times, in the name of love, a woman gives all her time, her attention, her social life, her projects, and without realizing it, she places the man at the center of her existence. This devotion, though noble in its intention, is toxic for attraction. A woman who stays active in her own world, who nurtures friendships, pursues passions, invests in her personal growth, sends a much more powerful message. I choose you because I want to, not because I need to, and that emotional freedom is profoundly seductive. Do you want to be unforgettable to a man? Don't give him your life. Give him the opportunity to be part of it without making him its absolute center. Be a complete universe he wishes to orbit, not a satellite revolving around him. The perfect balance lies in showing sincere interest without dependency, in demonstrating affection without urgency, in offering presence without unconditional availability. When a woman learns this art, the art of being generous in love but selective with her energy, her value automatically rises in any man's eyes, not because she manipulated him, but because she restored the natural balance between giving and receiving, between presence and mystery. Remember, what is common is forgotten. What is rare is treasured. You are not here to be easily obtained. You are here to be valued, admired, and above all, respected. When a woman feels that a special man is starting to drift away, the first natural, almost uncontrollable impulse is to try to close that distance with words, explanations, justifications, or promises. It is an impulse born from a deep fear of losing what once seemed secure. However, in the subtle art of human relationships, there exists a force far more powerful than the attempt to hold on. Strategic silence. We are not talking about a silence filled with resentment or designed as punishment. It's not about ignoring to hurt or manipulate, but making a conscious act of emotional wisdom. As Jung stated in The Dynamics of the Unconscious, resisting an impulse is not repression, it is transformation. True silence is a transformation of anxiety into serenity, of need into power. It is in silence that who you truly are is revealed. A woman who invests in herself, who keeps learning, who is not afraid to grow, radiates an irresistible vibration of silent strength. She doesn't need to talk about her worth. She radiates it. On the deepest level, the soul must also be nourished, reconnecting with authentic friendships, dedicating time to causes that inspire you, surrounding yourself with beauty, art, nature, everything that reminds you that your life has a greater purpose than simply being loved by someone else. The energy that was once directed toward him now becomes a centrifugal force that builds your own universe. And when a woman becomes her own universe, when her happiness no longer depends on external factors, something extraordinary happens. Her vibration rises to a level that not only attracts, but also filters, because not all men will be able to rise to the level of a woman who no longer needs to be chosen. It's no coincidence that when a woman focuses on her personal expansion, those who once took her for granted begin to feel her absence as a void that's hard to ignore, because she is no longer the same. She has evolved, she has been reborn. And she didn't do it to prove anything to anyone. She did it because, somewhere in the pain, she understood a radical truth. The most important person who needed to choose her was herself. Rebuilding yourself doesn't mean closing your heart or becoming cold. It means loving with an open heart but with your feet firmly on the ground. It means being able to receive love without losing yourself in the process. It means looking love in the eyes and saying, "I love you, but I don't need you to be who I am." On this new path, the man who returns, if he does, will find a different woman, a woman who can love him deeply, but who is no longer willing to lose herself for anyone. And if he doesn't return, it won't matter, because she will have found something far greater: her own life, her purpose, her happiness. Jung summarizes it beautifully in Memories, Dreams, Reflections, when he states, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain. People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul." You have chosen the path of awakening, the path of courage, and every step in your rebuilding will be a silent victory that will resonate throughout your entire being. Today you know that it is not about getting him back, it is about getting yourself back. Mastering your emotions does not mean repressing or denying them, it means learning to navigate through them with awareness, strength, and dignity. In the process of reclaiming personal power, the difference between an unforgettable woman and a forgotten one lies in her ability to master her emotional impulses, especially during moments of greatest vulnerability. When a man begins to pull away, a woman's instinctive desire is to seek answers, to force encounters, to demand explanations. It is human. It is understandable. However, it is precisely in these moments that true emotional value is defined, not by giving in to the impulse to act out of fear, but by choosing to act out of awareness and self-love. Carl Jung, in The Ego and the Unconscious, points out that the greatest obstacle to progress is the projection of our internal conflicts onto the external world. If we allow anxiety to direct our actions, we project that anguish onto the other, burdening the relationship with unsustainable pressure. But if we are capable of holding ourselves emotionally, without demanding, without chasing, without begging, then we rise above the storm and become a beacon of stability. Emotional mastery is therefore the ability to observe the inner storm without becoming it. It is knowing that feeling fear, sadness, or uncertainty is natural, but acting impulsively from those emotions only distances us from what we truly desire, building healthy, loving relationships based on mutual respect. This is where we must understand the crucial difference between healthy desire and toxic attachment. Wanting someone is natural, even beautiful. But depending emotionally on their presence to feel valuable destroys any possibility of authentic love. Attachment, unlike desire, stems from internal lack. It makes us believe that our happiness depends on another person. And by surrendering our power in that way, we become vulnerable, anxious, and ultimately less attractive. A woman who masters her emotions does not deny her feelings, but she also does not let them control her. She can miss a man deeply, yet still choose not to call him. She can long for a response, yet still choose silence. She can feel the impulse to reach out, yet still choose to remain centered. This inner strength is neither cold nor distant. It is the highest expression of self-love. It is the ability to say to oneself, "My worth does not change with the presence or absence of anyone. I am enough. I am whole." And this energy is so powerful, so magnetic, that it transcends words. It can be felt in the way you walk, in your gaze, in the way you exist in the world. A woman who does not need to be chosen to know her worth emits a vibration that no man can ignore. Emotional mastery not only transforms dynamics with others, it transforms your entire life. It frees you from the roller coaster of emotions dependent on external factors and places you firmly in the driver's seat of your emotional destiny. And when a woman reaches this level of maturity, she stops being just an option and becomes a conscious choice, sought after, admired. Jung also reminds us in the psychology of transference that he who looks outside dreams, he who looks inside awakens. Emotional mastery is precisely that awakening, to stop seeking outside what can only be found within. Today you know that mastering your emotions is not about denying your humanity, but honoring it. It's not about suppressing your desires, but recognizing them without allowing them to define your worth. It's not about being insensitive, it's about being invincible. Because in the end, the woman who masters her inner world is the woman who conquers the outer world without needing to chase it. There comes an inevitable and blessed moment in the journey of a woman who has worked on herself when she understands a liberating truth. She is not here to be chosen by anyone. She is here to choose herself every day, to stay true to her essence, to build a life so rich, so full, and so authentic that her well-being no longer depends on the presence or absence of another human being. When a woman reaches this level of consciousness, her energy changes radically. She no longer presents herself to the world seeking approval, love, or validation. She presents herself as a source of self-love so powerful that those around her have only two options: rise to meet her or walk away. And in both possibilities, she wins. Carl Jung, in Memories, Dreams, Reflections, tells us that the unlived life is a disease from which one can die. Living while waiting to be chosen, postponing your happiness until someone notices you, approves of you, or validates you, is to die slowly. Choosing yourself, on the other hand, is to heal. It is to live. When a woman stops trying to be a man's option and instead becomes the prize that only the truly worthy can attain, something powerful happens. She stops being a passive possibility in others' minds and becomes an unforgettable presence. She does not beg for love, does not plead for attention, does not compete, does not chase. She simply is. And in that authenticity lies her irresistible magnetism. If he returns, it will be because in your absence, he felt the void of not having you, not the burden of being pursued. It will be because, in the silence of your withdrawal, he realized that no one else radiated the same light, the same serene strength that you possess. And if he does not return, you will understand that he was never truly yours, and that your journey, far from being in vain, has led you back to yourself. Because in this process, what you have gained is priceless. Your dignity, your inner peace, your emotional freedom. Always remember, you are not here to be completed by anyone. You are already complete. You are not here to be validated. Your existence alone is validation enough. You are not here to live through the eyes of another. You are here to look at your own reflection and smile with pride. Jung said that those who do not become their true selves become echoes of others' expectations. Today, you choose to be a voice, not an echo, a path, not someone else's destination. It is in this moment, when you no longer need to be chosen, that your energy becomes so authentic, so radiant, so magnetic, that those who once took you for granted will feel your absence as an impossible void to ignore. But by then it will no longer be about them, it will be about you, about the unbreakable love you have finally planted and cultivated in the one place it can never be taken from, within yourself. If this message resonated with you and inspired you to see yourself through new eyes, subscribe now and join me on this journey of personal power, self-love, and transformation. Because this is only the beginning of your best version. There is a moment in every human connection when silence begins to speak louder than the messages, when attention slowly fades, and the once constant affection becomes absent. It's the point where everything that was built seems to dissolve. And it is there where attachment is born, not because the other person has left, but because something inside you resists letting go. You are not losing the person, you are losing the feeling of being seen, valued, and felt. And it is in that moment that the most human temptation arises to seek the other, to write, to call, to insist, to ask for an explanation, a sign, a closure. But what if I told you that true reconnection is not achieved by reaching outward, but by turning inward? What if, instead of chasing the other, you cultivated an energy so authentic, so strong, that your mere vibration began to be felt in silence? Carl Jung wrote in his work, Man and His Symbols, that what you resist persists, what you accept transforms you. This moment of disconnection is not your enemy. It is a door, a possibility for transmutation, because love doesn't end, it transforms. And the first step to reconnecting with someone who has drifted away is to reconnect with yourself, not from need, but from recognition, from the memory of your own worth. Here, we are not going to talk about manipulation strategies or power games. We are going to talk about presence, about resonance, about how your energy can begin to weigh more than your physical presence. Because when someone distances themselves, it's not just the bond that breaks, it's the image that person had of you that begins to fade. And what if you could rebuild that image not with words, but with vibration? Imagine that you are a frequency, that every thought you hold, every emotion you feed, every internal sensation is emitting a signal. That signal needs no words, no contact. It only needs to be coherent, to be authentic, because the human subconscious, as Jung noted, does not respond to what we say, but to what we deeply feel as real. And that emotional authenticity is perceived even from a distance. The beginning of this path is not easy because it goes against the impulse to control, to secure, to seek answers. But this is where the power of conscious intention comes in. When you stop looking outward to be seen and start looking inward to see yourself, something changes. It's as if the energy begins to condense, to become dense, magnetic, unforgettable. And it is there, in that internal space, where you become strong, where you stop waiting for the other person and curiously, they begin to feel you, not because you're doing something to be felt, but because you are being. And that being leaves a mark, because while attachment screams desperation, authenticity whispers mystery. And in the inner world, what whispers with truth has more impact than what screams with anxiety. This is how the journey begins, not with a phone call, but with an inner decision, not by seeking answers, but by becoming the answer. Because when you change your vibration, everything else begins to realign on its own. And it is then when the other person, without knowing why, starts to remember you from the soul. When we talk about empathetic projection, we are not referring to a mere wish that the other thinks of us. We are talking about a deep practice of silent emotional connection. It is about planting an emotional memory in the other's subconscious, not through direct contact, but through a vibration felt with clarity, authenticity, and presence. Jung, in The Psychology of the Transference, mentions that projection is one of the most common and dangerous processes of the unconscious. But when done consciously, with emotional responsibility, it ceases to be a trap, and becomes a tool for subtle connection. Empathetic projection does not manipulate, it does not force. It simply plants a seed. And it does so from calm, from pure intention, from an internal place that does not need validation from an immediate response. Imagine sitting in silence. No music, no phone, no social media, just you breathing deeply. In that space, you visualize that person, not with anxiety, not from need, but with gratitude. You look at them with tenderness and begin to see yourself through their eyes. How does your presence feel to him or her? What emotional imprint have you left? What feeling do you want them to remember when they think of you? This is not a forced visualization technique. It's a subtle emotional offering. It's like planting a seed without digging the soil, because what you're projecting isn't an image, it's an emotion. And the subconscious, as Jung explains in Symbols of Transformation, responds to emotionally charged images, not to empty ideas. This isn't about thinking, I want them to miss me, but about feeling, from your body, an emotion so honest, so warm, that it leaves an energetic imprint in the shared emotional field. Real connections are not erased by distance, they are only clouded by noise. Empathic projection clears that channel silently. It's like lighting a beacon in the middle of the fog. You don't know when it will be seen, but you know it's there. When you see yourself through their eyes, when you remember from their memory, you activate what Jung called the archetype of the inner other. Because whether you believe it or not, you also live in that person's unconscious. What you do with your energy modifies that symbolic presence. That's why you don't need to speak to make sense. The key is calm, no urgency, no expectation, only intention and trust. You project your presence like lighting a candle in a dark room. You may not see the light reflected immediately, but the candle is there, burning, emitting. And that energetic emission, if it is consistent and genuine, begins to resonate. You can accompany this practice with conscious breathing. Inhale from gratitude, exhale from love. Not from desire, but from recognition, because you don't project from what you lack. You project from what you are. And if you are presence, tenderness, stability, that is what the other person will start to feel without knowing why. Jung also points out in Psychological Types that the collective unconscious shares symbols, images, impressions. What you emit, especially if it's emotionally charged, enters that symbolic field, and yes, it can be perceived, not by the rational mind, but by the emotional body, the one that reacts to a song, to a perfume, to a dream about someone who is no longer present, that body which stores memories far deeper than logic. Moreover, this practice strengthens your own field. It reaffirms you, it reminds you, because by sending out that vibration consciously, you are also speaking to yourself. You are telling your system, I am present, I am connected, my energy matters. It is not just a signal outward, it is an anchoring inward. Empathic projection is not an act of control, it is a form of conscious love. It's allowing your energy to travel without forcing anything, but with clarity about who you are. It's an emotional letter, without an envelope or address, but with a destination. And most importantly, it's an exercise with yourself, because each time you do this, you also see yourself, you also connect with that part of you that loves, that feels, that vibrates. It's not just so the other person can feel you, it's so that you can remember the power you have when you stop chasing and start emanating. Thus, in the silence, in the stillness, your presence begins to make itself known, not through words, but through sensations, and those sensations leave a mark. Conscious detachment is one of the most powerful acts there is, but also one of the most misunderstood. Many believe detachment means not caring, cutting ties, becoming cold. But it's not that. Conscious detachment doesn't mean closing your heart. It means opening it without fear of the void. It's being able to stay with yourself, even when everything inside you wants to run toward the other. Carl Jung said in Memories, Dreams, Reflections that loneliness does not come from having no one around, but from not being able to share what seems important to oneself. Conscious detachment allows exactly that. To communicate with yourself, To listen to what matters without external noise. It is not indifference, it is a higher form of presence. When someone pulls away, the automatic impulse is to fill that space, to seek answers, to insist, to secure. But conscious detachment does the opposite. Instead of running toward the other, you stop with yourself. You sit in that uncomfortable silence, and then something magical happens. That silence begins to have a voice, and that voice speaks to you, about you. It's not about pretending you don't care. It's about not acting from a place of lack. True detachment is energetic. It's knowing how to step back without anger, without revenge, without bottled up pain. It's taking a step back, not because you've lost, but because you understand that your presence also holds value, that your silence is not empty, but a container of strength. When you withdraw with dignity, without anxiety, something shifts. The other person stops seeing you as a constant and begins to feel your absence. Because humans don't value what's predictable, they value what carries weight. An emotional silence, when it doesn't come from indifference but from self-love, is heavy. Jung writes in The Relations Between the Ego and the Unconscious that what is repressed doesn't disappear. It manifests in more intense and unexpected ways. When you consciously choose not to reach out to the other person, you're not repressing, you're transmuting the energy of that connection, you're changing the channel. You stop speaking with words and start speaking with your vibration. Conscious detachment also activates mystery. And mystery is fertile ground for emotional memory. When you become predictable, the other sees you as a constant with no nuance. But when you withdraw with presence without resentment, what remains is not a wound, it's an echo. And that echo doesn't resonate in the mind, it resonates in emotion. The mind tries to resolve, but the soul remembers. It doesn't remember the facts, it remembers the sensations. And if your absence is filled with authenticity, with love free of demands, with truth unclouded by noise, it will be felt. Because there is nothing more powerful than a presence that is not physically there but vibrates intensely. And this practice requires patience, it requires courage. Because there will be moments when you'll want to give in, to write, to explain. But that's when you need to take a deep breath and ask yourself, am I seeking momentary relief or am I holding space for deep transformation? It's not about not feeling, it's about feeling without reacting from urgency. You can support yourself with simple rituals. Write down what you feel and then burn it. Take deep breaths each time you feel the urge to reach out. Move your body to release the emotion. But most of all, you need to remember this. Your value does not decrease because someone walks away. Your presence is not erased just because there is no contact. In fact, the more authentic your detachment, the more powerful your imprint becomes. Because detachment is not forgetfulness, it is respect. It's a way of telling the other, I trust my energy so much I don't need to force anything. And that trust is felt. Because there is nothing more magnetic than someone who doesn't beg, doesn't plead, doesn't pressure, but simply vibrates in their truth. Jung also mentioned in The Ego and the Unconscious that healing can only occur when the lost symbol is rediscovered. In detachment, you become the symbol. That unresolved mystery, that emotional enigma that, instead of vanishing, becomes a presence that pulses in the silence. And although there's a natural fear of losing someone when taking distance, true power lies in trusting that what was built within you is never lost, that the invisible holds more strength than any word, that what is authentic doesn't need to be forced, that if that person is aligned with you, they'll return, not because you called them, but because they felt you. To detach consciously is to give yourself power. It is to remind yourself that you don't need to chase anything. Because what is real, what vibrates with you, what belongs to you by frequency, returns or never truly leaves. And if it doesn't come back, it's because you yourself will have grown so much that you won't need it to. This is how silence becomes a message, absence a vibration, and your energy an echo that is never forgotten. Emotional emission is one of the most transformative practices when done from authenticity. It's not about wishing for the other person to return. It's about feeling, vibrating, emitting a frequency so genuine that the external reality begins to align with your internal state. Because the universe doesn't respond to what you want, it responds to what you are, and you are what you feel consistently. Carl Jung, in the practice of psychotherapy, wrote, "We are not what we want to be, we are what we feel deeply." This principle is key. Your subconscious doesn't respond to empty affirmations. It responds to real vibration, to embodied emotion. That's why emotional emission doesn't work if it comes from lack, desperation, or illusion. It works when it comes from gratitude. Every night before sleeping, sit in silence, place a hand on your chest, breathe deeply, and begin to imagine, not that the other person comes back, but that the connection is already restored. Feel the warmth in your chest, the calm in your body, the peace in your soul. Imagine yourself loved, understood, embraced. But most importantly, feel it as if it's already happening. This isn't self-deception, it's emotional training. Because the subconscious doesn't distinguish between what is real and what is deeply felt. If you can sustain an emotion for long enough, your energy field changes, and when your field changes, your vibration becomes a new magnet. It's not about imagining conversations, scenarios, or detailed reconciliations. It's about feeling the emotional quality you want to experience: love, respect, calm, unity, and by feeling it, you emit, and by emitting, you transform, not the other person, but yourself. It's important that this practice is grounded in gratitude, not as a mental obligation, but as a real state. Thank you for this love that already vibrates in me. Thank you for this encounter that is already happening on a subtle level. Thank you because I feel complete, whole, loved. There is no pleading, no anxiety, only emotional certainty. Jung observed in the ego and the unconscious that emotion is the starting point of all psychic change. Emotional emission does not aim to manipulate, but to generate that change from within. When you consistently change your internal state, reality has no choice but to reflect it in some way. Maybe not how you expect, but always in coherence with what you vibrate. And while at first it may feel artificial, over time it becomes a refuge, because while everyone out there is seeking answers, you become the answer. While others react to the void, you fill your space with deliberate emotion, and that is felt. It's felt at a distance, because the soul recognizes vibration faster than it recognizes words. This exercise is even more powerful if you support it with small daily actions that reinforce that vibration. Listening to uplifting music, moving gently, surrounding yourself with beauty, speaking to yourself with tenderness. All of that creates emotional coherence, and coherence is the clearest language of the universe. And yes, the other person can feel it, not because you're projecting a mental image, but because you're modulating your field, and every field interacts with the fields of others. There's no way around it. If someone has been connected to you, they will continue resonating with you on some level. And if your vibration changes, that resonance changes too. Don't expect an immediate reaction. Don't treat this as a trick. Don't measure results. This practice is for you, for your peace, for your coherence. It's a form of vibrational meditation, an art of feeling without asking, of radiating without controlling. It is love without condition, first toward yourself. Carl Jung also wrote that the unlived life is a disease from which one can die. And how many of us are alive yet anesthetized? To emit emotion is to come back to life, not from drama, but from awareness, from the ability to create your own emotional atmosphere. And if the other person at some point feels that change in you, it won't be because you sought them out. It will be because your frequency can no longer be ignored, because you've stopped being a memory and have become a vibrant presence. Invisible, yes, but absolutely real. Emotional emission then becomes a way of returning to yourself, of restoring yourself, of being love before receiving it. And from there, everything changes, not because you push it, but because you emanate it, because the soul recognizes what is authentic. Silent affirmations are not just motivational phrases you repeat without feeling. They are energetic mantras, internal resonant pieces that shape your vibrational field. When you repeat them with awareness, from the body, from emotion, they are not meant to convince the other person, they're meant to remind you of who you are. Carl Jung, in Modern Man, in Search of a Soul, explained that we do not see the world as it is, but as we are. And how we are is largely built by the thoughts we cultivate repeatedly. Silent affirmations are seeds that, when planted with presence, transform your inner terrain. They don't alter who you are, they reveal it. These phrases are not spoken aloud. They are whispered in your mind as you breathe deeply, as you walk, as you sit in silence. They become an internal pulse that accompanies you. And most importantly, they ask for nothing, they demand nothing. They simply affirm. They feel like internal certainties, not external pleas. For example, I am present even when I am not near. My energy leaves a mark. I am remembered because I vibrate truth. I don't need to be seen to be felt. I choose to vibrate with authenticity. My absence is also a presence. I trust in the power of my field. My frequency speaks for me. I am aligned with what I deserve. Each of these phrases acts like a recalibration, because in moments of doubt, of impulse, of need, you can return to them and find your center again. Not to ignore what you feel, but to reconnect with your deepest, wisest self. They are small anchors that hold you when everything seems to shake. Repeating them is not mechanical, it's ritual. You do it when you wake up, before you sleep, in the middle of an intense emotion. And with each repetition, the phrase stops being a thought and becomes a frequency that is noticeable, that vibrates, that communicates without speaking. Jung also spoke of how the unconscious operates with symbols, images, and repetition. Silent affirmations work because the subconscious loves repetition. But not just any repetition, the kind that is loaded with emotional meaning, the kind you feel is true, the one that even without external proof already vibrates in you as certainty. And it's not about repeating to attract something, it's about repeating to become something, to remind yourself that you're not waiting for anything, you are choosing something, that you don't need to look outside because your field is already working, already emitting, already leaving a trace. These affirmations are the antidote to urgency, to emptiness, to the feeling that you need something more to be whole. Because when you repeat, "My energy leaves a mark," you're not saying someone must come back. You're recognizing that you are already leaving something behind. You're trusting in your echo. Make this an intimate habit. It's your vibrational prayer. And the most beautiful thing is, you don't need anyone to hear it because the soul hears, the universe hears, and most importantly, you hear. As they become yours, the phrases transform. Some will stop resonating and others will arise spontaneously. Listen to them. Feel which ones are born from you. Because when an affirmation is born from true emotion, its impact multiplies. Don't underestimate the power of the unspoken. Don't underestimate the power of the invisible. What you repeat silently with intention becomes a constant vibration. And that vibration builds realities. Conscious writing is not an act of emotional release, it is a ritual of focus. You don't write to beg, you write to declare. To anchor yourself in how you want to feel, to reprogram your vibration through the written word, which is one of the most direct forms of communication with your subconscious. Carl Jung said in the practice of psychotherapy that writing is a way to reveal the unconscious to consciousness. When you write with intention, you are not simply releasing thoughts. You are giving structure to your energy. You are deciding what you will feed within your vibrational field. And that has a powerful impact on how you feel, how you position yourself in the world, and how you experience yourself. The technique is simple but profound. Every day, or whenever you need it, write down how you want to feel. Not what you want to obtain, not who you want to return, but how you want your internal state to be. For example, I want to feel at peace, confident in myself, at ease with what was and what is. I allow myself to live from fullness, not from waiting. Today I choose to vibrate in certainty, in dignity, in love for myself. I reconnect with the feeling of being enough. I remember my worth without needing external confirmation. I choose to dwell in calm, even when the outside does not respond. My energy is clear, and because of that, my life aligns. These phrases become affirmations, yes, but with deeper meaning, because they've passed through your body, your pulse, your pen. Thinking is not the same as writing. Writing crystallizes, anchors, declares. Furthermore, this practice creates a space of intimacy with yourself, a refuge, a written truth that brings you back to the present. Because many times we're so focused on what happened or what could happen that we forget what is happening within us. Writing brings it back. Jung also affirmed that there is no transformation from darkness to light without emotion. And conscious writing allows you to observe your emotions without getting trapped in them. You see them, name them, transform them. Because when you declare how you want to feel, you are taking an active role. You are no longer a victim of your emotions. You are a creator of your emotional state. You can have a notebook dedicated solely to this, your vibrational journal. It's not just any diary, it's a space of creation. Each page written with this intention becomes an extension of your field. It's your way of dialoguing with the universe, with your energy, with your essence. And most importantly, you don't do it for anyone else to read. You do it to remind yourself. Because when what you feel becomes clear on paper, it also becomes clear in your vibration. And that is noticeable. That is felt at a distance in the way you move, speak, exist in the world. This practice also helps during moments when anxiety rises. Instead of writing to that person, write to yourself. Declare what you need, what you deserve, what you choose, because if you can hold your center on paper, it will be easier to hold it in life. Writing is an act of power, not of imposition, but of declaration. And when you become conscious of what you write, you become conscious of what you vibrate. And when you vibrate with intention, the world begins to respond with coherence. The body does not lie. While the rational mind overthinks and creates stories, the body vibrates, feels, and stores memory. That's why moving it with intention is one of the most direct ways to unblock stagnant emotions and raise your frequency. Body movement is not just physical, it's energetic, vibrational. Carl Jung, in The Ego and the Unconscious, proposed that all psychic energy, if not expressed, becomes a symptom. And many times, those symptoms manifest in the body. Tension, anxiety, fatigue, tightness. That's why movement is not about aesthetics. It's emotional medicine. It's a way to channel what can't find release through words. You don't need a complex routine, only attention, intention, breath. You can start your day by slowly stretching your body, feeling each muscle, breathing deeply. You can dance alone in your room, letting your body express itself without choreography, without judgment. You can practice deep breathing with gentle movements that follow the natural rhythm of your emotion. Every time you move your body with awareness, you're telling your system, I am present, I am releasing, I am choosing to feel differently. And that energetic signal is more powerful than 1,000 positive thoughts, because the body has its own language, one that resonates far beyond words. Body movement also breaks patterns. You always react the same way to certain emotions, for example by shutting down, freezing, contracting. By moving, you create an opening, because if something is true, it doesn't need to be forced, it only needs to be felt. And in that non-doing, you strengthen, cleanse, and reconnect with yourself. And from there, whatever is meant to return will return, not through pressure, but through resonance. Non-doing becomes strategic. It's an art, and like all art, it's cultivated day by day. Have you ever questioned why some women, who don't have dazzling looks or project a perfect life on social media, manage to deeply captivate men that many would consider out of their league? What is it that they possess that makes them irresistible? What strategies do they implement that perhaps you have yet to discover? The answer, though revealing, does not lie in external appearance. It's not about makeup, tight clothing, or memorizing seduction techniques in front of the mirror. It's something far more subtle, yet infinitely more magnetic. It's something Carl Jung understood perfectly. True feminine power lies in the ability to create emotional connection, in knowing how to touch a man's soul before touching his body. And once you internalize this, my dear, everything changes. Many women have grown up with the belief that to make a man fall in love, they must become physically attractive, that they must wait to be desired, pursued, or conquered. But the truth, a transformative truth, is that you don't need to start with the physical to win his complete devotion. In fact, if you learn to connect with a deeper dimension within him, something far beyond the surface, he will surrender completely without even understanding why. Do you know where a man's true center of desire lies? It's not where you've been led to believe, it's his mind. That's where true longing is born, where his insecurities live, his ambitions dwell, where his most intense experiences and unspoken desires reside. It's in that intimate and often chaotic space where you can enter, if you master his emotional language. And Carl Jung constantly reminded us that to change what we attract, we must shift the energy we project. And this applies perfectly here. Let me reveal something that is rarely explained with clarity. A man can give himself physically to many, but emotionally, he opens up only to the one who touches something beyond his surface. That's why, after an intense connection, he won't remember so much what you did, but how you made him feel. That, my dear, is true influence. That's what makes him think of you, even in your absence. And if you've ever felt frustrated because you give so much yet receive so little, if you feel like you're doing everything right but still can't get that man to truly commit, then you don't need to change your appearance or become more accommodating. What you need is to learn how to connect with his mind before his body, to venture into his inner world, a world few dare to explore. But you can do it. Stay with me until the end, because in this presentation, you'll not only discover how to awaken his deepest interest without physical contact, I'll also share expressions, practical examples, and an exclusive tool that you can use in your next interaction to become truly unforgettable. This isn't abstract theory. It's psychology applied to relationships from a conscious, feminine perspective, inspired by the principles of emotional transformation that Carl Jung taught. Let's begin. There is a powerful reality that few accept because it challenges all the conditioning we've received since childhood. The male body is not the point of deepest connection with you. It's not his most sensitive part, nor the one that creates the strongest bond. His true desire, the one that drives him, the one that transforms him, is born in his mind. Yes, that inner universe full of thoughts, expectations, hidden fears, silenced desires, and contradictions. That's where true alchemy happens. Because once you understand how his mental world works, everything becomes clear. You no longer need to compete with anyone or exhaust yourself trying. What you are doing is cultivating emotions, awakening curiosity, and generating desire from the invisible. And believe me, that kind of connection leaves an unforgettable mark. There is a huge difference between being physically attractive and becoming unforgettable to him. Anyone can catch his gaze for a moment, but only someone who stimulates his imagination, emotions, and his need to feel valued and admired will remain in his heart. Carl Jung said that everything we give returns multiplied, and when you offer presence, authenticity, and confident feminine energy, it comes back to you transformed into genuine love. So how do you connect with the male mind? With anticipation, not immediacy. With subtle hints, not full disclosure. The male mind, like the female mind, responds more intensely to mystery than to the obvious. It's not about expressing everything. It's about creating space for him to imagine, to long for more, to evoke your presence even in your absence. Play with the implicit, with pauses, with glances that say more than 1,000 words. Tease him with meaningful silences. Make him wonder what's behind your words. The secret lies in making him feel emotions. Because a man doesn't fall in love with your actions. He falls in love with how you make him feel through them. You can be direct, spontaneous, tender, or passionate. But if you don't touch his mind, if you don't awaken emotional responses, you'll just be another fleeting memory. On the other hand, if you make him feel understood, admired, challenged, intrigued, then you will live in his thoughts even when he's surrounded by others. Do you see why I say the mind is the true starting point? Because that's where real desire is born, where lasting interest grows, where the fantasies are built that drive him to seek you without you having to chase him. Connect with his mind, and his body will naturally follow. And if you've understood the power hidden in these words, you're about to discover something even deeper. Because when a connection begins in the invisible, the visible becomes inevitable. While many keep searching for answers on the surface, you will begin to connect from a much more intimate place, his inner world. It's essential you know this now. If you only touch the surface, the responses you'll get will also be surface level, automatic, and eventually monotonous. But when you dare to explore his emotional world with sensitivity, intelligence, and full presence, everything changes. Because there is something men cannot explain, yet they cannot ignore either. A woman who knows how to communicate with his soul before touching his body. While others focus their energy on perfecting their appearance, you will awaken his desire through the subtle. A single word spoken at the right moment, a fearless, sustained gaze, a pause filled with intention, a comment that enters gently but deeply and lingers in his mind for hours. And that, incredible as it may seem, can be infinitely more captivating than any touch. Because there truly is something no man can resist, a woman who knows how to stimulate his mind before touching his skin. And that woman can be you. If you choose to stop seeking from a place of insecurity and begin expressing yourself from your inner power, just as Carl Jung taught. When you heal the way you think and feel, the world begins to respond to you differently. This includes your emotional connections too. Now that you understand the mind is the true center of desire, knowing it isn't enough. What truly matters is how you use that knowledge to your advantage. And this is where most people go off track. Some believe it's enough to give compliments or repeat phrases like, "You look great today." But that doesn't touch anything deep. What really activates his interest is your ability to play with his imagination, create emotional tension, and leave him with a phrase he can't stop thinking about. That, my dear, is done using 3 subtle but incredibly powerful tools. And if you learn to use them with grace, you'll become unforgettable to him. The first way to connect with his mind is through words that paint images. We're not talking about empty lines or romantic cliches. We're talking about suggestions that, without being explicit, spark a whole narrative in his mind. For example, instead of saying, "I'm so into you," say something like, "There's something about you that makes me think things I probably shouldn't." See the difference? You're not giving anything away directly. But at the same time, you're saying everything. He's the one who fills in the blanks. And that's the beauty of it. Not laying it all out, but letting him imagine, wonder, and desire. Because when a man starts building mental stories with you, you stop being just another woman. You become his favorite story. The second way to connect with his mind is through strategic silence. And it might sound simple, but it's an incredibly powerful tool. We often feel the urge to fill every gap with words, as if silence means something's wrong, but it doesn't. When used right, silence creates mystery, tension, desire. Picture this. You're having a conversation, you lean in and say something bold, something unexpected, and then you go quiet. You hold eye contact. You don't add more, don't explain, don't backtrack. That moment becomes magnetic. His mind starts working overtime. He wonders if you'll say more, if you'll act, or if you're simply savoring the moment. That pause becomes the thought he can't shake. Carl Jung often reminded us that even what is unspoken carries meaning. And when you learn to trust the power of silence, you realize you don't need to convince anyone, you just need to resonate. The third way to connect with his mind is by mastering the art of almost. What does that mean? That not everything that begins needs to be finished. There's a unique pull in what remains unfinished. It's that moment when he leans in expecting a kiss, and instead you whisper something in his ear and pull away with a mysterious smile. It didn't happen, but almost. And that almost becomes unforgettable. Why does it work? Because he expected closure and you gave him a cliffhanger. You left the story open. You gave his mind space to imagine what could have happened. And that's often more powerful than 1,000 physical gestures, because now he's captivated not by what happened, but by what he's still craving. And when you step away, he's not left with satisfaction, he's left with hunger. And that's the secret. It's not about satisfying him right away. It's about creating emotional hunger, about becoming that lingering thought, even when he tries to distract himself. And these three tools, the suggestive word, the provocative silence, and the almost that intensifies desire, aren't conventional techniques. They are emotional artistry, conscious, feminine expression. Very few women use them intentionally because they require presence, inner confidence, and emotional mastery. But if you're here, it means you're ready to stop being just another woman and start being unforgettable. It's not about having the perfect body or saying the most romantic line or making the most calculated gesture. It's about learning how to slip into his imagination without asking permission, to touch emotions he can't control or explain. And when you do that, there's no more competition. You're playing on a different level, a dimension where the energy you radiate speaks louder than any words. Carl Jung said that when we cultivate self-love, it naturally reflects outward. And in that state, you become magnetic, unmistakable, desired. And the most beautiful part, all of this already lives inside you. You don't need to force it. You just need to remember it. A woman who refuses to settle for being seen longs to be felt. A woman who doesn't seek validation radiates authenticity. And that's where your real power lives. When you learn to connect with a man emotionally, you realize something that completely transforms the way you relate. You don't need more strategies to be liked. You don't need to pretend to be something you're not. You just need to be aligned with yourself. And do you know why? Because men may desire many, but they only remember one, the one who touched their soul. And this isn't about becoming some master of emotional manipulation. Far from it. It's about raising your energy, learning to see beyond words, cultivating a presence so magnetic it can't be ignored. Exactly as Carl Jung taught. When you love yourself deeply, you raise your frequency, and with it, the quality of love you attract. Now, I want you to reflect on this. Every conversation is an opportunity, every glance a bridge, every silence a message. When you speak with him, listen beyond the literal. What is he holding back from expressing? What emotions is he containing? What fear hides behind his confident posture? Men, even if they don't show it, long to feel understood too. They want to be admired, seen, and valued for who they are, not just for what they've achieved. And when you can truly perceive his inner world, not to fix it, but to accept it, he experiences something rare, serenity. And there's nothing more attractive to an emotionally mature man than a woman who brings him peace without losing her spark of mystery. But here's something even more powerful. Don't just awaken his desire, earn his respect. Because when a man respects you, he doesn't play with you. He doesn't question your worth. He doesn't offer crumbs. A man who respects you wants to make you feel safe, valued, and important. And to get to that place, you must first clearly define who you are and how you deserve to be treated. It all starts with you, with your energy, with your boundaries, with your ability to say this yes and this no from a place of self-love. Do you see now how everything is connected? And here's another essential truth. Don't be afraid to leave a mark. Sometimes we think we need to keep things light, not go too deep, not show interest, so we don't scare someone off. But true magnetism doesn't come from hiding. It comes from revealing yourself with grace and confidence. You are not here to beg for scraps of attention. You are here to create an experience, to be that unforgettable woman. Why? Because you touched something no one else dared to. His most vulnerable, emotional dimension. So the next time you share a moment with him, ask yourself, am I seeking validation or am I expressing my truth? Am I chasing a reaction or leaving an authentic emotional impression? Am I acting out of fear or from my power? The answer to those questions will determine whether you become a fleeting memory or an unforgettable presence. And never forget, what you attract is deeply tied to what you believe you deserve. That's why working on your self-worth isn't just a minor detail, it's the foundation of everything. As Carl Jung said, self-love is the greatest gift you can give yourself. From there, everything begins to evolve. So celebrate yourself, respect yourself, love yourself. Because the more you do, the more you'll attract those who see your light, not just your reflection. From the moment you stop seeking externally what can only be built internally, your energy begins to shift. And the most extraordinary part, you don't need to announce it. You don't have to declare that you've changed. It's felt. Men notice it, even if they can't explain it. It's something that radiates from you. It's your new vibration. It's a calmness that seduces, a presence that unsettles those who were only prepared for the version of you that no longer exists. When you become a woman who not only knows how to listen, but also how to observe, you begin to notice subtleties in conversations that once went unnoticed. You pick up on how he responds to certain topics, how his body language shifts when you mention something emotional, how he unconsciously opens up when you make him feel safe. And there, in those tiny details, is where you can plant seeds of desire from an authentic place, not a manipulative one. You don't need to control him. You only need to connect with his most human side. Because genuine desire doesn't come from control or empty mind games. It's born from real emotional connection. When a man feels he can be fully himself around you, without masks, without pressure, something releases within him. He relaxes, his defenses lower, and from that space, he truly sees you, he feels you. And that kind of connection is so rare, it simply can't be forgotten. And you know what else generates desire in him? A woman who feels comfortable in her own skin, not because she's perfect, but because she has nothing to hide. A woman who expresses herself without apologizing, who sets boundaries without aggression, who knows when to move forward and when to wait. That woman doesn't need to seduce, she naturally attracts. Remember Carl Jung's words, what we think of ourselves becomes our truth. And if you see yourself as powerful, free, desirable, and worthy of love, that is exactly what you will project. There is no scent more captivating than healthy self-worth. That's why here comes something few dare to apply. True seduction begins with you, with your inner dialogue, with how you treat yourself, with how you look at yourself in the mirror. Because when you see yourself with admiration, when you truly recognize your worth, you no longer accept just anything. You don't settle for lukewarm attention or emotionally unavailable men. From that new energy, you choose differently. And that truly transforms your relationships. When you're with him, instead of seeking his approval, observe him with curiosity. Listen with all your senses. Perceive him. Don't rush to fill silences. Don't respond impulsively. Breathe. Speak only when you truly feel moved to say something, not when you feel the need to please. And if at some point he pulls away, don't see it as a defeat, see it as a sign. Because the woman who has learned to reach a man's mind doesn't beg to stay in his life. She knows she doesn't have to convince anyone to be valued. The man who is ready for something meaningful with you will sense it from the very beginning. So free yourself from everything. Free yourself from the anxiety of needing to be enough. Free yourself from the obsession with triggering reactions. Free yourself from the urgency to control everything. Your worth does not lie in how he responds to you. It lies in how you choose to stay connected to yourself without losing yourself for anyone. And if there's one thing I hope you take from all of this, it's that you have more power than you realize. Not the power to control a man, but the power to guide a connection from a place of emotional authenticity, from your center. And that, beautiful soul, is something no one can replicate. So continue nurturing that version of yourself who speaks clearly, who isn't afraid of her intensity, who leaves a mark without effort, and above all, who understands that seduction is not an external act, it's a way of being. Because once you become the woman who knows how to touch a man's mind, you no longer need to raise your voice to be heard or run to be followed. Your presence is enough, your authenticity is enough, and that precisely is the kind of energy that turns superficial connections into unforgettable experiences. And if you've made it this far, all I can say is thank you. Thank you for giving yourself this moment, for allowing yourself to listen, reflect, and open your mind and heart to a new way of connecting. If something I shared today resonated with you, if it made you feel seen, understood, or simply left you thinking, then it was already worth it. Always remember, your value is not measured by how much others desire you, but by how deeply you respect yourself. And when you begin to relate from your inner power, from your authenticity, from that self-love that Carl Jung so often spoke of, not only do you transform, but the way the world responds to you transforms too. Thank you for staying until the end of this presentation. If you found this content valuable, I invite you to leave a positive comment or appreciation. It helps me immensely to continue creating with passion. And if you haven't yet subscribed to the channel, now is the perfect time. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss what's coming next, because what's coming will go even deeper. Sending you a warm embrace full of light, and I'll see you very soon.